Welcome to this episode of The People Dividend. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am absolutely delighted to have in the virtual studio today Brad Smith. Brad is going to challenge us, inspire us, instigate us, and make us think about character. I know it's a word that gets tossed around a lot, and I think Brad has a particularly unique perspective on this. Brad Smith is the founder and chief executive officer of Stellar Insight, Inc., a business growth consulting and coaching company. He has been an analytical chemist, production plant and equipment designer, a business manager, a business consultant, and an executive coach for CEOs and business owners. He constantly pursues insight into business success, organizational excellence, and the practical actions it takes to consistently achieve significant business growth. In Brad's own words, listen up, everyone, everything is a theory until you experience it and can consciously repeat the experiment. So today, Brad is actively coaching chief executive officers, business owners, legislators for organizational growth and excellence. He's worked extensively with a variety of industries for more than 25 years. And those organizations that fully commit to the work that Brad does almost always achieve significant results. So I know for my scientists out in the listening audience, for those of you who are joining us, I think you'll find this episode particularly intriguing, because what Brad does is he limits his work to ambitious, curious CEOs, business owners, and their teams, to people who are really committed to their organization's excellence and growth. He runs a masterclass for deep intuition development. He has studied mysticism, intuition, and human development for several decades. And you can learn about, hopefully we'll learn a little more about his masterclass that he also runs in this. Brad, I'd just like to welcome you again to the People Dividend with Mike Horne. Can you say a few words about yourself to our audience?
Well, let's see. If you take an analytical chemist and turn him loose and run him through, growing up, I watched my dad start 34 companies and kill 30 of them. So there's a lot of things you can do wrong. And so every one of those stories came through the household, and I learned from that. But from a chemist's perspective, you have to have facts in order to move things forward appropriately. But you also have to have insight, which is why I realized when I renamed my company about a decade ago, that what I actually sold was insight, because you need it in order to move forward in a fairly rapid manner. So there's
somehow in one of the schools I attended or I learned is insight into action, that it's insight that propels us or can propel us into action. And I'm so curious, Brad, before we dig deeply into character, 34 less 30 equals 3. That means that 3 of those companies that your father started succeeded. What made the difference for those 3, do you believe?
He didn't run them. My dad was a chemical engineer and a biochemist, right? So he was a technical person. He raised me to think technically, to look at things as structural, but also be creative. So that's
yes, and I think that's having worked with a lot of chemists, having directly reported to a chemist who led a big R&D organization. I think that's something that escapes many people about the creativity that chemists bring to the lab, to the world. And I've really seen that creativity that I wouldn't have expected. I expected from biologists, but I didn't expect it from the chemists. And it was quite heartening to see that.
You have to have it. Have to. It's not if.
Right. To advance. So let's dig into our topic for today, and let's summarize it perhaps in the word character. What can you describe to our audience about character? And I'll just stop there. Full stop. Talk about character for us.
All right. So I have a story, but I'm going to describe it this way. Character is nothing more than a full set of habits. Some of them are slower to change. Some of them are quicker to change. Okay. But if you look at your whole character as decisions you started making from the moment you were born up to when you were verbal, and then beyond that, you don't remember the things before you were verbal. And so all that part of your character is plugged in, but it's not permanent. And here's how I got started into that. At 18, fall term freshman year, as a chemical engineering student, I developed an ulcerated colon. And the doctor said to me when I finally got to him in December, 3 sentences that changed my life and shoved me really hard to learn about character. So the first sentence was, gee, Brad, if you'd have waited 6 weeks to come see me, you would have bled to death. That had my attention. Then he said, you'll never eat strawberries, corn, or lettuce, or anything with roughage ever again in your life. And my 18-year-old brain said, fat chance, buddy, that's not happening. Because I kind of like those things. And then he said, the one pivotal sentence, you have a psychosomatic disease. Your emotions affect the severity of your symptoms. And in that moment, I made a full-on 100% commitment, which is an important part of character, commitment to conquer the disease. So it means if I had created it, if it was psychosomatic, then I could uncreate it. And what I found after digging, if you would, yes, I changed my diet. Yes, I had some medication and went through that, but it took me about, probably 9 months to stop the bleeding, to get it to where it was only episodic and not constant. And it took me another 3 years, so total 4 years, to get the pain down to where it was episodic and not constant. And that was a driver. It made me look at who I am and how that relates to my body. So I looked at my character, and this is homework for everybody. Look at who you are and all the patterns in your life, whether it's your health, whether it's your wealth, whether it's your relationships. All of those are a product of who you are. All your relationship in business, all relationships and skills are there. So what I learned by having that shoved at me was conscious growth of my emotional intelligence. I had to, or I would have died. So, and I actually had a cousin who died from it. Same disease. So it's like my choice was different. So in this story, if you make 100% commitment, 100% means there's no wiggles. You go after it, you learn, you experiment, you watch what's going on. And the first key is become aware.
So I'm just going to ask, so you make progress with this disease, you improve your life. We're
Right.
running the camera now on the movie. You complete undergraduate school.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then?
Well, okay, so the wrap up of the story is 30 years later, now 30, 31, something like that year, at age 30, no, actually 29 years later, at age 47, I uncovered in my internal research a memory from about 10 or 11 months old. And what I assumed was my first spanking, but it was a traumatic experience. In that moment, I made the decisions that put my disease in place at 11 or 12 months, right? So I went back in with hypnosis at 47 and reworked that memory from an adult perspective rather than a toddler's perspective. And in the next 12 months, the disease permanently went away. Permanent.
Amazing. And I'm so happy for you in that regard as well. Everyone suffers trauma. And that's sort of what I'm led now to believe, having recently interviewed, and all of our audience can find the episode, not in the distant past, with a trauma specialist. And we discussed the issues of, some people are traumatized by watching the evening news at this point. And yet there are others, my friend, as I communicated in that podcast, Joseph Allman, who watched his father be assassinated in front of him. He later went on to write a great book, uh, Better Not Bitter, about that experience. Um, so you have this discovery. You trace it back through. I don't know if "trace it back" is the right word, but you explore it through hypnosis, uh, and you're cured. But something happened in between. I mean, you had already adopted healthy diet. You had made modifications, behavioral modifications, and
So at the core of it, what I found was I was in charge of everything that was in my life. Everything. The stuff coming into my life, there were patterns to them, and the stuff that came out from me. And what I learned was that let's just say every human being is like a still pool of water. And who we are is like a limb reaching into the middle of that pool and vibrating with the wind. Okay? And what we hold as beliefs come out as what comes back to us. So put the layers here: individual consciousness, individual subconscious, collective unconscious. Carl Jung's stuff, right?
Jung.
So when I hold beliefs in my subconscious, they go from me moment to moment, and the energy that passes through me down into my subconscious and then out into the collective and then back to me as experiences and patterns in my life for me to say yes or no to. So if you run a victim racket in your brain, then guess what? It's going to show up in your life and you're going to have lots of opportunities for that. But if you take a perspective that everything is something you've created to learn from and take the learning process as the core of it, that is what I've discovered about life and about character. We're here to learn, period.
Well, the no more noble pursuit than that is learning. And I guess, to tie that back to Jung as well, I think Jung said something to the effect of is that, the greatest gift in life we have is to realize of becoming the person who we are, I mean, which is a process of learning. Um, and how have you unpacked that? And let's take that into the business world. Let's take that into the consulting world. How do you unpack that for clients? I mean, how do you take this, epiphany you've had?
Right. Here's the short sentence. You can't grow a company, or for that matter, a company and a state or legislators are the same, right? You can't grow a company beyond the limitations of the leader, period. Right? There's a glass ceiling over everybody, no matter what, whether it's personal or financial or health. There's a glass ceiling on it, and when you bump up against it, you get frustrated. So look at your whole list of frustrations. Here's the homework: write down the full list of everything that frustrates you, and then turn it around and say, how have I caused this? And you have to go several layers deep in order to do that.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I often think about it. Somebody arrives to me as a coaching client. One of the questions I'm always thinking about asking is, what happened? What happened that brought you here? Let's understand it, because I think you have to get to that worry box, that frustration box, and certainly you have to get to the accountability box in order to imagine and perhaps change behaviors for a different future. And you were able to do that.
Well, I think everybody is. They just have to want it.
Right.
I wanted it pretty badly because I had immediate feedback, right? So yeah, sometimes it was a 24-hour watching period, but I watched. It was like, what were the results from this decision? What were the results from this input? And so I watched that. Business is the same. Look at all the team, literally. Look at the people that show up in an interview process to say yes or no. How much are they a reflection of you? right? Do
Yeah.
you have rapport with them? Do you not have rapport with them? So you can't build a company without good, strong capabilities. And
It's
if you
so
think,
interesting to think about the leader, the big L leader. I'm not talking about leadership or the ability to, exercise leadership on an everyday basis, but to think about the capital L leader. And one of the things that I believe, and I think it's confirmed by 40 years of history and social psychology, is that we have a problem with managers and leaders, particularly in the United States. I mean, we have a lot of very poor managers and leaders. Uh, usually people get promoted on the basis of their technical competence. They've been really a good salesperson, they've been a good engineer, they've been a good chemist, they've been a good biologist, they've been a good people person. People are promoted on the basis of their technical competence as opposed to screened in for their ability to lead. So what makes that distinctive for you? I assume it's awareness, but I'm not sure.
well, so when I talk to someone, I essentially read character almost to the level they can't understand it. And
Uh-huh.
I know things about them they don't know. That's the intuition part. Okay. But if you study character deep enough and you list out all the different levels that frustrate you, that you're good at, right? It's like pay attention to the things that you cause problems for others, please, and pay attention to the things that cause you problems. Because we're wired, if you would, for self-preservation. That's the
Yes.
neurobiology of it.
And do you think that it's more important then, or I don't know if there's a rank to this, but what do you think about, really developing strengths as opposed to, focusing on developmental needs, what's not working, where am I deficient?
I've read that philosophy, and I look at I look at everything. I don't just look at the few things, right? Now, if you're really good at something and you know you're not good at something else, right? Then if you've got the capability financially to hire that skill and that character type, then do that. Here's an example. I had a friend who was an office manager and she wanted to hire bookkeepers. And we figured out that the core capability that was needed for that position was attention to detail. And so the question we got to, which is completely legal, is do you lose socks in the laundry?
Right.
Right? So that's attention to detail. I talked to a guy that was a manager and told him that, and he said, is that even possible to lose socks in the laundry? There was a guy that knew detail completely. So underneath each position, there's a set of requirements. Underneath each kind of organization is a group culture set of requirements. So I have a list of, it's available if someone wants to email me and ask for it, what I call a hiring list. The first thing people do when they're hiring is they go straight to the skills. That's the third step. The first one is what are the results that need to be achieved? The second list is what are the tasks that need to be done to create the results. The third one is what are the skills needed to do the tasks, right? Then to create the results. But the fourth list is what are the character traits that person needs in order to be able to learn the skills and do them almost automatically, like losing socks in the laundry.
Yeah, so interesting. And you can find out more about Brad and his work at stellarinsightsinc.com, where you can learn more about Brad. And I want to, maybe you mentioned in our pre-meeting before the show about an intuition class or intuition mastery. Can you say some more about that, or
So,
provide a brief exposition of that idea?
sure. Um, so, how I stumbled into that, turn a chemist loose on spirituality and mysticism, which is what I am, both, right? And the study of that means that if you work at it enough, you will wind up with skills that many people haven't developed yet. So I'm a 28-year meditator. That means that I sit and I watch myself and I watch my mind, and I am aware of how I regulate my whole being. My emotions, my mind, my intuition is, if you would, the interface between the subconscious mind, my individual subconscious mind, and my conscious mind. And so I pose questions. Here's a practice you can do. If you have a problem you can't solve, put it to your mind clearly just before you go to sleep, and then watch how you wake up with the answer. That's a way to solve problems we can't conquer. Now, intuition is this process that we use in the physical brain, which is kind of the last receiver for who we are. We work in beta for our analytical thinking, alpha for our daydreaming and some of our inspiration. Theta is a deeper state, which is most of our sleep cycle, and delta is the bottom 30 minutes of a 90-minute sleep cycle. But if you do it appropriately over years, 2 or 3 initially is what it takes to see results. But you wind up developing brainwave neurological pathways across the brain. And so the amplitude of your brain waves gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's what meditation does. There are other practices like breathing. Pranayama is one of those things. And what happens over time is you stop being only your single personality and open up into the broader perspective, if you would, of who you are, not just the physical body and not just your limited perspective of, in my case, almost 74 years. So,
Brad, as you describe it, I hear intuition as a practice, or there's a practice of development. I may be wrong about that, and also some people describe intuition as a sixth sense, something that. How do you contrast those ideas, or do you accept both of them, or what do you think?
It is both the sixth sense and something you can develop. Everyone can, but you got to do the daily work. Literally, sit your fanny down, sit yourself down and do the meditation. Do the breathing exercises. There are other energy things that you can do. And eventually you get to the place where when I sit with someone, whether they're on the phone or in a long distance away or not, there's a rapport that's built. That rapport isn't just a figment of your imagination. It's real. And what's happening in that, eventually you get to the place where, all right, here's a piece, just steps out a little bit. Take your hands, rub them together, pull them apart, and then slowly bring them together and stop where you feel some resistance. And then push through that and bring them together closer. And eventually you'll get to a place where it feels, in my case, I feel it out, 15, 20 inches hard. It's like pushing through a pillow. And what that means is I've opened up my consciousness beyond the physical level to the higher levels of who I am. When I use that, my clients get that advantage. I've done all this work and they get to short circuit the process and take a jump ahead. And it shows up in their wallet. I love that part.
Yes, and you take this topic that, look, I'll be direct. Some people might see as woo-woo, and yet you have very direct applications in CEO coaching, team coaching, strategic planning, facilitation. How do you help people move from understanding this as sort of ethereal to practical? Now, you have a very practical example that you launched with. I mean, you couldn't be more grounded than that.
Here's an example. Most people leave a job not because they don't like the job, but because they have a boss that doesn't work. They have a person that needs some growth, right? It's like, take responsibility, be accountable for everything that happens, because no one is a complete victim. No one is 0% of every event that happens in their life. No one.
Right. One of my mentors always used to say, what would happen if an adult showed up in the room? Is another way that I, begin to think about that and help to explore topics with folks. It seems that in a lot of my executive coaching work with C-suite leaders, aspirants to the C-suite, that people are often worried about, well, how do I do more of this, do more of that? And by the time we're into our work, it is really about interpersonal issues, about self-awareness, about this ability to grow, to be able to hold yourself out as an object so that you can see it. And to your earlier points around being able to learn about yourself. And I don't know, I encounter a lot of people who aren't able to do that, or don't have the skill to do that, or haven't been equipped to think about it that way.
Everyone that doesn't think or can't think that they're growth, there are three types of people. There are those people who learn and require learning. They move easily into new situations. There are people that are okay with situations but don't press their change. And there are people who are deeply resistant to change, or almost fixed, right? And so
Yes.
Look at who you are. There are some of the fixed people who are good friends of mine. It takes them 2 to 3 times as much effort to incorporate the new learning into their life and their subconscious, if you would, into how they create results in a way that is useful to them. But whatever it takes and however you're built, take on the task of becoming more self-aware. If you want, I recommend meditation, and there's 3 or 4 types that are useful. And take on the task of becoming, put it this way, pick a hero, pick several heroes that you admire, that are really good people, and then list out all the different character traits that you want them to have, right? Excuse me, that they have that you want, and learn to grow in those. Integrity being the top.
Yes. I mean, my last book was just that, Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically. For me, when I think about this topic of integrity, I think about the whole cloth. If you were a structural engineer, things would hang together. And for me, it's a sense of congruency.
Yep.
And what I also believe is that most people enjoy working with people who are happy. Happiness is a result of congruency. Thoughts, words, actions align, they matter. And once integrity is diminished, it's very difficult to recover. And I'm curious about your perspective on that.
Look at it this way. I define integrity as the governing value. And all 4 levels of it. What I believe, what I think, what I say, and what I do have to align. If you know something about someone and it's not appropriate to say that to them, be silent. Okay? If someone else knows something about you and they're silent, ask and be willing to be vulnerable and share what they know about you. Part of what a coach does is it gives people an outside perspective. How to have you look up the Johari window, which I thought was brilliant the first time I saw it.
I knew Joe Luft.
Yeah, did you? Huh. So there's the quadrant that says what I know and what everybody else knows match. Then there's the quadrant that says what I know, nobody else knows. That's not what he calls secret. I call it private information. Okay? There's the part that other people know that you have no clue about. And that's part of what you can get out of coaching. What is it someone else can tell you if you're open to it? That's the curiosity part, right? What is it someone else knows that can help you be significantly better, right? And then there's the part, which is the corner I'm after, doggedly. What's the part I don't know and no one else can see either? That's the part that I'm pursuing. What's the part of me that I need to know that would make me better serve people and serve the world? That's my goal. Conquer the unknown.
Conquer the unknown. I think back to my first experiences with the Johari window many decades ago as a teenager in some leadership development groups and facilitated by, I think, people who had a lot of skill in helping to use visual cues to show what was public, what was private, what was hidden, what was unknown. And it still remains a powerful tool today, I think, in working with leaders and executives. What do you do with the outputs from that? I mean, let's say you're working with a Johari window. What would you do with the outputs from that?
Write it down, okay, first, and then decide whether you want to grow in that area or not. There's certain areas I don't care about, right? But there are other areas I'm absolutely determined to grow in.
Yes.
So I have found I am a relatively shy person when it comes to public exposure. And this right here, me being on a podcast, is a growth area for me. Show up, share with people what I've learned over the last 74 years, and help them be better. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yes, and I think it has to start with that intentionality of adding value. I'm not embarrassed to say I'm a helper, as an executive coach. I think it's a noble profession. And it's a way of thinking about it. It's not about where's the next sale. I'm interested in you as a person. And, with that sort of abundance mentality, then things can follow from that.
Yep.
Maybe it's the process that your father went through in starting 34 businesses with 3. I mean, there was a doggedness to that.
Yep. Well, we are either driven or we're not, right? What is it? What is it? There's different tests you can take. The DISC. You're either a driver,
Myers-Briggs, any of the psychological inventories, right?
Right. But what is core is, why do you do what you do? My very first facilitation was with a group of, if you would, litigators, attorneys that were litigators. It was the litigation group, right? And the first question I asked them was, why did you choose this as a career? And to go around the room and listen to the answers, right? And then I said, why did you choose this organization to be part of and to do the work you do? So the why question, which was a good book, the why question of what motivates you, what's important to you, right? Dig into that. Because if you don't know, you'll lose energy in it sometime. That's important. And there has to be an alignment for the people that are hiring people. There has to be an alignment between the individual that's coming into the organization and the organization's why. If there's an alignment, it can't be just money. People don't show up for just money. Well, they do, which is a shame, but it's like they show up so that they can have a purpose. What's your purpose in what you do? And there's literally no action you take in a day that doesn't have a purpose. None. A breath, that's sustaining life. Watching someone, that's to gain information and build rapport. So, purpose.
So true. And people will be able to find out through the show notes from today's episodes about getting in touch with you, Brad, at stellarinsightsinc.com.
Actually, there's no F at the end. I apologize, Mike. Stellar Insight, singular.
Insight. Thank you. StellarInsight.com.
StellarInsight.com. Thanks for letting me
Insight.com.
correct.
That's great. I actually like the simplicity of Stellar Insight as opposed to Stellar Insights. Inc. There's a crispness and a clarity
There's less
to that.
ego.
And less ego. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm thinking, we've been discussing for about 35 minutes now, more or less. And, if you were to have, just as a way that we begin to wrap up, 1 to 3 pieces of guidance that you would offer our listeners, what would it be? I mean, as they explore the topics that we've considered, character or intuition, what would those pieces of guidance or advice be? You've offered so many great ideas about meditating, reflecting.
Right. If look at your negative reactive emotions, or do you get angry, right? Then you're deciding that you're not powerful and you're giving yourself permission to be powerful. If you blame people, it means you don't want to take responsibility, and that's what toddlers do. Those are harsh perspectives, but that's what I have found. So take accountability and show up. Design who you want to be and what your life is going to be about. If you want to add another 0 or 2, actually have my first 4-0 client, 4 zeros, right? I'll make him a multi-billionaire. Is there going to be change in him? Yes. So show up, design the outcomes you want, and move all the internal stuff that you've got in you out of the way to make it happen.
Well, that's great. And and particularly in combination of those insights, will, make for a rich life. Maybe as the Buddha said, happiness is a journey, not a destination. And it's what we do with the journey that takes us there. It's been an absolute delight, Brad, for me to have you as a guest on the People Dividend. So wonderful, the pieces of advice. And this is an episode to come back to several times. I think you can take more. And then I encourage everyone to learn more about Brad at StellarInsight.com. So I want to thank you. And until the next episode of the People Dividend, stay well.